not quite up to brain yet, but we're getting there. What we're going to do now is imagine a drill drilling into the head. So first you would hit scalp, then you would hit your skull. Now, when you hit your skull, you're now in the intra space, intracranial space. The first tissue you'll encounter there is the dura mater. The dura mater is the outermost layer of the meninges. So the meninges refers to a triple layer sac that includes the dura, the arachnoid, and the pia. And when I say arachnoid, I mean the arachnoid membrane and what's known as a subarachnoid space. The dura is the toughest, most layer. The pia is the most delicate, softest, and the pia is the layer that's actually touching your brain. It's suctioned on there. The meninges serve to protect your brain. Also, the meninges, especially the dura, causes a watertight seal around your central nervous system. Because inside, not only do you have brain, but you have the brain sitting in a water like substance, which we'll talk about later. Now, you might have heard of meningitis. That used to always be my example when I would say if someone, forbid, got meningitis in college, particularly bacterial meningitis, they might have to shut down the college and send everyone home. But now we have a different infectious disease as an example. But nevertheless, if you've heard of meningitis, that's inflammation of one or more of the meningeal layers, either caused by some infection or an autoimmune type of reaction where the body attacks itself. Now, the meninges, along with the ventricular system, help cushion your brain from blows. Even with these systems, we know we have a major problem with head injuries. In sports, definitely an issue, but also car accidents and violence and things of that nature. All right, let's take a look at the ventricular system, which is a system of liquid filled spaces and passages where CSF is produced. That's cerebro fluid, cerebrospinal fluid. CSF is produced in each ventricle. So let's go through the ventricles. The ventricular system is made up of four ventricles plus a tube. So this is the ventricular system. Let's go through them. So here's a lateral view, sagittal, if you will. Here's an anterior posterior view, anterior posterior AP view, coronal. And what we're seeing here is dorsal ventral view, or axial. And here is a view that is showing you the paths that the cerebrospinal fluid takes, because this is not a static system. It's sort of like a lazy river with constant production of cerebrospinal fluid and constant absorption of that fluid. And of course, I always want to mention this when we talk about dehydration, never forget about brain dehydration, because that is a very big deal. It's one of the reasons why you get a headache if you're dehydrated. Sorry. Okay, let's go through the ventricles. Again, the ventricles are not brain areas. Now, it looks like it, these dark regions, they look like brain structures, but again, they're not. They're liquid filled, otherwise empty spaces in the brain. What I'm outlining here are the lateral ventricles, definitely the largest of the ventricles. And here I'm doing the same in this view. That's for completeness. Okay. There are two lateral ventricles, one in each hemisphere, and they're rather large. Let me just say a word about the lateral ventricles. These were amongst the earliest signs of brain degeneration that we noticed in some degenerative diseases. What happens is ventricles get enlarged, but it's not really that the ventricles are growing, but rather the brain is retreating. And when the brain atrophies, these otherwise empty spaces get bigger, right? Okay, let me change color. The next ventricle is this one. And pretty tricky here. There. This is the third ventricle. So in red, we have the lateral ventricles, and in green, we have the third ventricle. Finally, the fourth ventricle. The fourth ventricle. Now, about that tube, what should we use? About white. The tube I speak of is right here. You see, the tube is the cerebral aqueduct, and it connects the third to the fourth ventricle. Is this going to do anything? Of course not. The tube is the cerebral aqueduct connecting the third to the fourth ventricle. And there you have the ventricular system. Now, if we look at flow of CSF, you see it's flowing down and up over the brain and getting absorbed through your sinus system. Now, in each of the ventricles, I said we produce CSF. That CSF is produced by specialized tissue called choroid plexus. Okay, the choroid plexus, you could see it's a squiggly tissue that secretes CSF. And here's a label for it in the fourth ventricle, choroid in the third, and choroid of the lateral ventricles. There is no choroid in the cerebral aqueduct. Cerebral aqueduct's not a ventricle. Now, if you were to look at this ventricular system with CSF being produced in the lateral ventricles, flowing to the third, which makes its own CSF, all flow through the cerebral aqueduct down to the fourth, which makes its own CSF, and down. If you were to imagine a plumbing problem, where would it be? Yeah, right here. So sometimes, either due to developmental issues or disease states, the cerebral aqueduct can become pinched. In which case, what will happen? Well, the lateral and third ventricles keep making CSF. And what that will do is cause pressure, tremendous pressure. The condition you get is hydrocephalus. Literally, water head. If you want to see pictures of what this looks like and you have a strong stomach, just Google hydrocephalus and you can see, particularly in babies, what you get is an enlarged head. In fact, I shouldn't have said only in babies, because newborns' heads are not fused, which allows the brain room to expand. So you get some really frightening looking images. A lot of those children don't make it, and a lot of them do. Those that do, many will have intellectual deficits, but some will be completely fine. In adults, when this happens, it's usually a result of tumor growth, um, which pushes brain aside because there's no room in a fused adult skull. There's no expanding. So brain gets squished and pushed around, and again, this area can become pinched. The thing to do in an emergency type situation is to implant this stent. It has a valve, pressure regulated valve. As pressure builds in the lateral ventricle, the valve will open and drain that extra CSF either into the stomach or the bladder, depending on what the surgeon prefers. This will have to be redone, or a permanent surgery will have to be done to open up that problematic area. But this will certainly buy time and save uh, precious days, because with the newborn, you don't want to put them under general anesthesia. You want them to get as strong as possible before you do a major surgery. So this can buy you a lot of time.